You know how like I talk and you guys are like, oh yeah, but you don't mean it. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah, you know that? Okay.
Welcome to the Fantom Zone. 3 fans, 1 podcast, and a sea of comics.
Sea of fans. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Was that like a seagull?
I was trying for seagull.
I got it though.
Thank you. Context.
Noah's face, he didn't get it.
No, I got it, but it was funny that Jered tried to do like a seagull like hand symbol, and it didn't really go so well.
I didn't know my hands did that. They just did that
you went.
themselves.
It was subconscious.
No, I knew that. I knew they did it, but I didn't control it.
And anyway, today we are going to be talking about Marvel crossovers.
Did you see Marvel's turn?
Yeah, Marvel's turn. I think it's fair to kind of do it a few episodes after. Mm-hmm. With this one, we're going to kind of talk about the differences between, not the differences, but kind of what Marvel does with their crossovers that might be different from DC. And just how their crossovers work in general.
We're going to take like a preliminary look at Secret Wars, Infinity, and Civil War, but no deep dives, not yet.
No.
Yeah.
Especially with Infinity War, that whole story arc going on in the movies. Mm-hmm. I don't want to like overbore people with that whole storyline. But
Let me explain to you what you just saw.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and I think there's just a kind of like, we have to address it because we're talking about Marvel crossovers. Those are by far the biggest, but we're not necessarily going to go into it yet. And yeah, I think those deserve probably their own deep dives, sometime in the future. But
Dot.
Ellipses.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing that I've noticed, like how Marvel does their crossovers, or, I mean, I guess a theme that's popped up more than once is the whole heroes versus heroes thing. Where like you have something that separates a team, and then they get at each other's throats.
Yeah.
And which Civil War is a great example of that one, which we all know how that played out. But another one that I don't think many people, or people might know about, is Secret Wars. And I know Jared's really excited about this one.
Secret Wars?
Yes.
Never heard. Which one?
It's a secret.
We're going to the original.
Yeah, it's true.
Uno.
That is true. There is more than one.
Yeah.
There's like 4.
Yeah.
Oh, I only know 2.
There's Secret Wars. There's Secret
Same,
Wars
though.
2, which was a sequel right afterwards. That's real popular. Maybe all crossovers, but especially Marvel crossovers, is they would have a very successful thing, and then they'd do a sequel
Let's do it
shortly
again.
after. That
Let's
was
do it again.
Uninspired.
Let's do it again.
Civil War.
Oh, all of them.
Aww.
I mean, at least with Civil War, they waited a time and got, I don't know, waited for at least an idea or whatever. But anyway, there's also Secret War, which was
Just taking off the S.
Yes.
Taking off the
I
S.
know. For a reason, I was like, yeah, we just said that.
it's a huge pet peeve of mine, actually. Don't name stuff like other stuff.
So similar. That's weird.
Because it's actually a good story unto itself. Has nothing to do with Secret Wars. They just knew that was a popular name, which we'll get to in a second. That's going to play heavily with Secret Wars. But anyway, and then there's the more recent Secret Wars that happened, which was actually a pretty good story. Yeah, that's
Wait, it has the same name, but it's just
the exact same
Modern
name.
Secret
Has the
Wars.
exact same name.
Good luck Googling these.
And there was Infinity War. Yeah, you have to do it like a movie where it's like with a date. And there was Infinity War, and then there's Infinity Wars that's going on right now.
And Infinity Gauntlet.
Yeah.
Yep.
Infinity Overwatch or
Infinity Mitten is really exciting. If you guys get a chance, check it out.
It's more domestic.
But so we talked about Infinite Crisis on our DC episode. So it's the sort of obvious comparison to the Marvel side of Secret Wars. Okay. But there are a lot of differences. And there's some disagreement about who started the large crossover. I think Infinite Crisis actually may have come out first. But Jim Shooter, the writer of Secret Wars, assures everyone that they were writing for a year.
Now, Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Oh yeah.
What did I say?
Infinite Crisis.
Infinite Crisis.
Because
that
I wouldn't have
definitely wasn't the first one.
Yeah, I wouldn't have corrected you if it
Thank you.
wasn't an actual comment.
You know what it is? I'm saying it because Infinite Crisis is easier to say.
Yeah.
My brain is like, just go for the easy one. Who cares if it's real?
Yeah. There's more words in Crisis on Infinite Earth.
My brain's like, I don't think we need to challenge ourselves. You're just going to fail. So anyway, but what's sort of funny about this to me is that Secret Wars only started, a lot of you'll know, the baseline trivia here, because Mattel, a toy company, bought the rights, finally got the rights to Marvel toys, and wanted to have some sort of kind of source material or multimedia production. And they had no budget for a movie or a cartoon show, which is how they did like He-Man, things like that. Mm-hmm. So they were like, just write a story.
With Marvel, of them.
All the characters we're going to make toys for. Which actually didn't even, they ended up making toys for people that weren't in the story, but whatever.
Yeah. As they do.
And again, this is said on a lot of different podcasts, but it's silly enough. The name Secret Wars, which you'll notice if you've read it, has very little to do with the story itself.
Yeah.
Only because those two words happened to test well with focus groups when Mattel did it.
So this was all very calculated at the beginning.
Very editorial.
So what
beginning.
if the words that went well was like trampoline puma?
We were this close to Dinosaur Ninja. That, honestly, given...
I mean,
comics would have been changed forever.
Irrevocably.
Yeah, I guess it's calculated, but it's also so weird.
It's not, I mean, like, we can appreciate the editorial
I think it's
aspects.
interesting.
Yeah,
it for sure.
Is. But it's also from, like, the fan side or the artistic appreciator or whatever. It's a bit like, ugh. That's kind of disappointing.
Yeah, like, it wasn't an organic growth in story. Exactly. It was just... money.
Yeah. No, I mean, the title, I mean, I don't want to give the plot away, but Battle World.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have just called it Battle World or something. Like, that just sounds so much better than
way
Secret
better.
Wars.
I didn't even think about that. You're absolutely right. That's way better.
Because it has something to do with the story.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's to be said, too. It's not like Secret Wars sounds aesthetically bad. It just is completely random. But incidentally, like, I will say, I think one of the things, it's also the beauty of this story, is that unlike Infinite Crisis, where they have some editorial responsibilities or some intentions where they're trying to like have a consequence of that story. Like we want to make Superman more special or we want to unify stuff. There's something kind of cool that happened where Mattel was like, make a story and they didn't care.
Yeah.
So there was no constraints. There was so Jim Shooter, who is a fantastic, fans of old comics will know, just a great writer. He was basically given kind of what do you call it? Like there was no
like full creative control.
Just do whatever you want to do. And I think because of that, the story, though it kind of ends up lacking stakes at time, has a lot of freedom and goes to some really fun, interesting places. If you don't know, it's really super easy plot. Infinitely powerful being, the most powerful being that had ever existed in Marvel at this point, called the Beyonder, basically sees that superpowered characters are very important to the universe. So he becomes interested, grabs the biggest Marvel heroes and Marvel villains, puts them all in one planet, says, "Kill your enemy, and if you do, I'll give you anything you want."
Dance, monkeys, dance.
Exactly. As Noah mentioned, like created a battle world for them to fight on, so it's completely away from the rest of Earth or whatever, and then it plays out from there.
It seems like
that is
the plot to Predator almost.
Yeah, really.
This is what the Predator planet is.
My favorite part of that, side note, was when they presented Magneto as a hero, and then all the other heroes were like, "Boo!" And it's like, "Fine, I won't be with you guys."
They're all in a bubble. There's two bubbles in the beginning, where the villain bubble and the hero bubble, and he's in the air, and it really is like the Thing next to Spider-Man. Like, what the hell is this guy doing in our goddamn bubble?
That is funny, but I mean that kind of attests to Magneto's character.
Yeah,
and I think that might be why he was in there. Because
no question.
He
can be good at times.
Oh
but
no,
I love
the complex nature of Magneto. The fact that it was like, oh, he's not though. Should he be in a third bubble?
And they end up forming in a certain way the third bubble of all their own.
Yeah.
But the villains, if you look on the villain side, it was some really creepy people.
Like the creep.
It was real bad. The creep.
Like the creep.
Was a villain we've made up. No, but I mean, it was Doctor Doom and Kang and the Absorbing Man and Doctor Octopus and I'll list them all now. And Lizard and Molecule Man. Okay,
Stop showing
yeah,
off.
You're not gonna stop. Am I showing off or
A little.
just being sad and pathetic? Anyway, but yeah, so
Both.
So thank you. Look how pathetic I can be. Anyway, so the story, I think there's an elegant sense in its simplicity, and Jim Shooter is just a really good, I think, writer and plotter, especially. So where it's not as magical or really significant historically as Crisis on Infinite Earths. For my money, it's easier to read, and it's very clear. It has a very clear plot, and he's really good at highlighting the characters. So it's a very ensemble-y kind of thing. And it's like, oh, Human Torch has a cool moment. Wolverine has a good moment. Thor has a cool moment.
We did mention that in the last crossover episode with Crisis on Infinite Earths, that there's a lot of exposition in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of setting up and talking about a thing.
I think like the beauty in the simplicity of the plot allows those characters to shine.
Yeah.
Because it's not so plot driven. It's character driven.
Exactly.
Instead.
I mean, the thing that makes Secret Wars shine is the simplicity and kind of those moments. And the thing that the detriment to the analog to that, Crisis on Infinite Earths, is there's a lot going on. And there's a lot to process, and it kind of gets lost with that simplicity and just clearly understanding it.
We've talked about the difference between Marvel and DC before. For my money, I think those differences are often overstated. But incidentally, it is funny that DC, their first crossover is dark and heavy. And you might say maybe a little better written. And I don't know. I mean, that's arguable. And the Marvel one it just begins as a romp.
Yeah.
Where no one dies. That's another one. Spoiler alert on this one. It is, I think they were like, we're making toys. We don't want to.
We can't have that character dead.
Bunch of corpses.
That might have been the only editorial oversight that they might have had. Like, hey, you can't kill anybody though.
But right, just as a crossover, since that's kind of what we're talking about generally, it's a great start. For Marvel, I think so, because like the story is enjoyable and they really. In a certain way, I think you get this a little bit less with Crisis. With Marvel, they're like, look at what we've got. The story just begins with, here are all our heroes. Here are all our villains. Now they're going to fight.
Yeah.
And so maybe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They fight pretty early. And to the degree that's like, okay, we all should fight. No more fighting. Let's rest at our house. Another fight. Let's fight.
Reception-wise, I think the action and the humor is what Secret Wars kind of like people took away.
Yeah.
So we've got two other kind of, I guess, major Marvel crossovers, kind of just at least nod at or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, we can't have a crossover episode without mentioning Infinity Gauntlet and Civil War. I was going to say Secret Wars. So I was like,
that's why when I was talking about it, I just said Infinity, because I was like, Infinity Wars, Infinity Gauntlet, and Infinity. That's what we mean, though. All of that.
Yes.
I'm going to say Infinity Gauntlet is the greatest crossover to ever be written. That's my opinion.
Can you mute his mic now?
I think a few things happen in it that are just amazing, but I don't think Marvel had created a story that had the same weight the Infinite Crisis did in terms of big events. I mean, individual stories, sure. So it's sort of like Secret Wars is this almost silly thing that they did, fun little action-packed little romp. Then Infinite Crisis, I think, creates memories. It's amazing. And it's not till Infinity Gauntlet comes out and I think that's the early 90s. We'll check it again. But that, I think Marvel pulled off something that was as significant.
I mean,
had the weight.
As a story, just the way it was written, the fact that they needed all of the stones in order to happen, and then just slowly seeing it happen one by one, that builds the tension. The fact that the stakes are higher, population destroyer, not really world destroyer, population destroyer. Yeah. Characters die, so yeah, I mean,
and I think that it spans so much. I mean, I think that's why both of those stories, DC and Marvel, but this one specifically, is it spans the entire galaxy or universe, if you want to say. Yeah, sure. Universe. I mean, and you just have characters that are either newly introduced or shown in a different way. And the deaths, I mean, they were surprising.
Yeah.
But in lack of.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, spoiler alert, everything goes back to normal at the end of it.
That's true. Yeah.
So, I mean, all the stuff didn't matter, but it was still shocking to see. I mean, Nebula's...
While it was coming out.
Yeah, Nebula's whole thing is kind of upsetting to me personally.
Yeah, there are some small consequences, like the Infinity Watch gets formed, like Adam Warlock gets... this is huge spoilers, so just plug your ears, but gets the gauntlet at the end and distributes the gems to different hosts. I don't know, owners or something like that.
Yeah.
Jewel bearers.
That's not bad. That's not bad. Stewards, maybe. Yeah. Jewel stewards. There's a reason they didn't.
We
call
dub
them
thee.
but yeah, outside of that, it kind of goes all back to normal. You know? But I also think in terms of a story, it's just really, it's well conceived. It's clear, and it's, I think, again, back to that Crisis on Infinite Earths, because they have these things that they're trying to accomplish in an editorial sense that aren't necessarily organic to the story. The stories can often feel like things are happening inorganically or out of nowhere, whereas Infinity Gauntlet is written just as like this self-contained space opera.
That's a good difference, because it wasn't made specifically to streamline everything or to fix things. It was just
a really
to tell
cool crossover event that happened.
One of the things that Marvel's done a really good job at crossovers, especially in the they had people like Jim Starlin. He's the writer of Infinity Gauntlet and ended up being an architect of a lot of Marvel's cosmic world. They have a way of making the scope of their things feel gigantic, huge, universal in scope, but symbolizing them with these really compelling characters. So, you know, Thanos and death and things like that. The story feels like a Shakespearean drama, but that have this large cosmic scale.
Well, that's the thing I like the most about it. I like Thanos. I like him a lot in that story, and I like his as a character, not like I get like daggers stared at me.
He's deeply in love.
But I think it's such an interesting concept that he did it because he wanted to impress Death, and then he gets to the point where he has the tools he needs, and then Death's like, "Yeah, I'm your servant now because you're above me."
Too powerful.
Yeah, and then. I like Thanos a lot. I like his story. I think he's a deep character.
Yeah.
And you don't get that a lot in villains.
I was to say, as far as world destroyers, quote, go, I think he's probably one of the more interesting ones for sure.
Yeah, because can you quote anything that the Anti-Monitor has ever said?
No.
Yeah. Dark side.
Die! You guys suck. Die! I think it's... No, it's true. Thanos has like a rich, introspective, interior. And he's... I think if you read anything he's appeared, especially that Jim Starlin wrote, that's what it feels like, is that he's this cosmic behemoth. He's as powerful as Marvel's gods, and more powerful in many cases, but he's more dangerous because he's really, really smart. He's devious and calculating. And
stoic.
Deep, yeah. And kind of funny too. But, I think that's absolutely right. I think he's an attractive personality. Anyway, so more on Infinity Gauntlet later, I think. But
yeah, I mean, we could have an entire episode on this.
And one day probably will.
Yes,
I think.
But another good one is Civil War, which I kind of touched on.
I love Civil War.
No, not if you like it or not. I'm saying it's a good crossover to mention.
Great crossover. That's a very good point. Yeah.
Nobody asked for your opinion.
No, but I don't think it's. I think it's well marketed, and I think big things happen. I think it's relatively poorly written. I'm not going to use this as an opportunity to like crap on Civil War or whatever, but I do, and we have to mention it. Absolutely. I think it's really post strong marketing, and that story looks interesting and good from far away, and the concepts are good. I think a lot of stuff happens in it, and a lot of the approach is kind of.
So your problem is with the execution?
It is, yeah,
okay.
For the most part.
Yeah.
And there was some more interesting stuff at the time going on, I think.
Well, so Noah brought up something interesting earlier that I wanted to talk about a little bit, and it's that he noticed that Marvel has more hero versus hero crossovers, where like the stakes are friends are fighting friends, or people that should be on the same side are like fighting each other. How do you feel about that?
About whether...
Do you like that more?
Like that type of story?
Better? Because that's what Civil War is, you know what I mean? It's like...
I'll say this. I think it's whether it's good or not is proportionate to how realistic they make that conflict. And we can disagree about which crossovers did or didn't do that, but I think the issue is if you're going to have these entire factions who are both have the same kind of moral alignment, so to speak.
Well, just real quick before, because your point would make more sense, I guess, if you just summarize the plot of Civil War, like why they started fighting.
That's a good point. Yeah, so it's pretty similar to the movie if you've seen the movie adaptation, that there's an explosion that takes place between superheroes that are trying to fight villains. There's an explosion that destroys a school. And it has 9/11 parallels to it. The entire Marvel United States basically gets very concerned with rogue superheroes and how dangerous they are.
Like whether or not they should be part of like a registry.
Exactly.
And like be held accountable.
The Superhero Registration Act. Very quickly, Marvel, again, the United States passes this law, and Marvel's hero community are split on
whether or not it's a good idea,
exactly.
if they should sign.
I was about to say the good side. It's not supposed. It's supposed to be debatable, but the anti-registration side is headed by Captain America, and the pro-registration side is headed up by Iron Man. And it's sort of how they play out their different sort of philosophical feelings about it, and a lot of the fun of that story is just seeing like how people align with others and
switch sides sometimes.
That's my favorite part about that story is like seeing like, ooh, who's on whose team, because I like the leaders of those teams, but it's also interesting to see kind of be characters.
That's
or
why
like that,
I really like Civil War. I do have problems with Civil War, especially in the comics, because of how Tony and Steve were written. I feel like a lot of their actions were out of character, even if they were pushed to the extremes. That I feel like there are lines that these characters wouldn't cross that they did in the comics. Like it gets vicious.
What's funny about it to me is that movie does a better job creating meaningful character-driven tension than the comic book did. So
that's what I was just about to say, because their actions and kind of what they do, like the airport scene is a really good moment that I don't think you really get in the comics, or at least you might, but when they're like, are we really going to do this? And it comes to a point to where like, well, we kind of have to, because you want to go this way and we can't let you go that way.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel out of character. It's not like, whoa, those are all assholes.
Because they're still kind of joking with each other as they're fighting.
Yeah.
So.
And the Russo brothers in that case, I think, understood that this really has to be personal. It can't just stay in this abstract level, and having... again, spoilers. There's going to be a lot of spoilers this episode. Just be prepared.
Every episode.
You're right. Absolutely. It just feels like with this is a major plot point. But Bucky killing Iron Man's parents.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that part of the story, I think, that's where it starts getting super personal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes sense on why Iron Man gets pissed.
Yeah.
Well, like overall, that's why I like Civil War as a crossover. It's because it's driven by like a person's beliefs. It's very personal and interpersonal, whereas like some of the other crossovers are driven by bad guy must punch, must stop.
Yeah,
and Civil War is driven by, again, more internal things.
There's and especially, and that was interesting because there's an idea of like, let's take their ideologies and make them conflict,
clash,
and see which one. For each character, it's not just Captain America and Iron Man, but for each character, what's going to be more important? Their relationships with one another, or their ideas about what heroes' responsibilities are, or something like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the takeaways from this is, as far as like Marvel crossovers go, they do have quite a few heroes versus heroes, or like something happens within a team that splits them, and it's these guys against these guys, not necessarily world changing.
Some sort of internal conflict as opposed to an external force.
And then you have. I've realized, too, Marvel does a lot of cosmic, like huge cosmic universe scale stuff. Like DC has as well, but there's like two that really stand out in my mind, which is both Infinite Crises. But yeah, Marvel does a lot of huge cosmic ones.
So in a sense, and I think that what's interesting here is that the way that DC has thought about cosmology is let's do universes. So let's have this expanse of universes, whereas Marvel has generally stuck to one universe.
Like one dimension, but it's huge.
And then they've had a more, not necessarily interesting, but they've gone into more links about talking about the structure of that universe. So yeah, it's just been sort of different approaches. Marvel has parallel realities as well, but
we'll be talking about that on my deep dive today.
Absolutely. But in the way that DC, I think, has made the structure of their world, everybody isn't concerned.
I'm from alternate universe, blah.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like a very identity oriented sort of thing for a lot of the characters.
I think the detriment to that too is so whenever Crisis on Infinite Earth was happening, sorry to bring this up, Marvel one, but I just thought about it. Is you have all these planets and worlds and universes dying, but then you have the heroes over here, and it's just like beep, no, that planet's dead, but they're still focusing over here. But what Marvel does is
when they wipe out a world, you care.
Yeah, because like, I mean, they really focus in on it because there's that one world that they're focusing on that because, like you said, it's all in this one universe. So it's like, oh, why you just killed all these people from this planet or whatever. So I think there is a little weird emotions that go on with both of them and how they approach it.
We also want to say, like, we are talking about the main general thrusts of these companies. We understand that there's certain stories that DC has that really flesh out, their sort of universe and vice versa with Marvel. So it's not to say that like there aren't exceptions or whatever, but yeah.
Yeah, so that's the, I guess, generalistic stuff of, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Summation of Marvel crossovers a little bit, how they differ, what we like, and the bigger ones.
And if we haven't said this yet, we did a DC crossovers episode. If you haven't listened to that, listen to that, because in the beginning of that, we really talk more generally about the concept of comic book crossovers. Then we do some DC stuff. Obviously, in this case, we're getting right into it.
Yeah, we didn't want to step on our own feet or repeat stuff we said. So
yeah.
I'd check that one out.
Well, and so the next part, we're going to be taking a closer look at certain crossovers in the Marvel Universe that we picked for whatever reason. It's not necessarily our favorites.
Just ones that interest or like we wanted to tell people
something
about.
that we really wanted to discuss about these certain crossovers.
It seems like what we've been doing with a lot of our picks is sort of like, what's the crossroad between or the nexus between this is really good, but maybe a bit underreported.
Yeah, exactly. Something we want to bring to the forefront for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And I'll go first. The one that I chose was the Onslaught Saga. Came out around 1996. So I was 4 at the time, but I love it now.
You read so early.
It was like, retrospective. I didn't read it when it came out. But Charles Xavier has always been one of my favorite characters. So when I found out that this existed, right? I love that boy. Man, whatever. But yeah, when I found out that this existed, I was completely intrigued. So I'll give a brief quote unquote overview because the Onslaught Saga is kind of
sprawling.
Yeah.
When you said that you were going to talk about this one, I was like, oh,
good luck, girl. But I will try to, I guess, pinpoint some of the things that I found interesting that moves it forward, and you guys can chime in with moments that, you thought stood out to you. But it starts a couple of months before the actual, like, Onslaught crossover begins. And so the prelude was kind of Xavier and his X-Men were fighting Magneto on his floating space thing called Avalon, and I only remember that because King Arthur reference. And that this is the part when Magneto pulls the adamantium from Wolverine, and Xavier just like goes crazy and then shuts down Magneto's mind. But while doing that, a piece of Magneto kind of got into Xavier's subconscious and festered there for months. So that was kind of the beginning. Like, that battle was like the seed of Onslaught.
I mean, just that battle alone, you have so many moving parts.
I know.
And that's insane. You have Wolverine getting the metal ripped out of his body.
Yep.
And then Xavier being like, whoa, fuck no. Let me destroy your mind.
And we actually mentioned this before in an earlier episode. It was Fatal Attractions. That's the storyline. I recommended it for Magneto.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. It's a really good one.
Crazy. But yeah, so that part of Magneto that's within Xavier's conscious kind of like festers and grows, and eventually becomes Onslaught, which he kind of functions as an agent of Xavier's subconscious like wishes. So Onslaught's goal is the coexistence of humans and mutants. So what Xavier wants, but using Magneto's methods. So,
dangerous.
Kind of a loose cannon. And so like in the months before the actual Onslaught crossover event, Onslaught would appear kind of off screen. It was very mysterious in several different issues of comics in the Marvel Universe. And like his name would be written somewhere and people would be like, ooh, Onslaught, who's that?
Voldemort?
We don't know. They don't know. And so it was like this looming thing.
It gets forgotten. It was a cool campaign. It was very like Blair Witch. Like, something's coming.
Yeah, exactly. And it's one of my favorite parts of crossovers. I know I mentioned that before, is like I like the build up, I think and they did a good job with Onslaught Saga. But kind of the tipping point that drives that like Onslaught's here is a young mutant is beaten to death near Xavier's school. And when he finds out about this, something in him just like snaps and ta-da, Onslaught's here to correct that. Doesn't go well. I know some people, this is why I find it most interesting, is some people would be like, if Magneto and Xavier would just combine, if they would work together, it would be fine. Onslaught is proof. Not a good idea.
Well,
no.
I think that's funny too. The creators or writers might have heard of that, and they're like, "Oh, you think so?
You want to see the worst possible scenario about that happening?"
And there's something cool about the fact that, like, oh, I love their relationship.
Yeah.
And this is a manifestation of their relationship.
Of both of their wills.
And it becomes this psionic entity. It's deeply destructive.
Yep. So, yeah, Onslaught awakens and then starts kind of popping in and trying to get allies to his side. He gets Mimic, the Blob, Chamber, Post, minor characters. He goes to Phoenix and is like, hey, join me. And Phoenix is like, no, that's a little extreme for me. No, thank you, Onslaught. So Jean was able to resist Onslaught's temptation.
That's telling right there. If you have the Phoenix,
he couldn't recruit
like,
Phoenix.
Nah, you're a little crazy.
Also, what is he? Well, never mind. Good.
Yeah.
Keep going.
But that was kind of like the prelude in phase 1 was like Onslaught amassing his forces, people actually recognizing that he's a threat. And then kind of phase 2 of this event is when he kidnaps Franklin Richards, who's Susan and Reed Richards' son, who I could sit here for an hour and list all of the powers this little kid had.
All of them.
He's super strong.
He's maybe the most powerful character in the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, I mean, he's super strong. Onslaught knows that, kidnaps him because he can't actually get him to come along with him. And so Onslaught has this thing where with his psi energy, when he absorbs a person, he becomes more and more powerful. So people try to stop him. He's just like, I'm absorbing you now. I am unstoppable. One of the turning points, though, is when Thor smashes open Onslaught's armor and they see Xavier inside. And then he yanks him out. And it just makes Onslaught more powerful because he's like, ha ha ha, that wimpy Xavier's not holding me back anymore.
And it's such a weird thing, too, because it's like, what was Xavier doing?
I'm so glad you mentioned that, and asking that question is really good because one of the things they did was lead you to believe it was just Professor Xavier.
Yeah.
So most of phase 1 is thinking that
Xavier's gone bad.
Is that he's gone bad. So it was a cool like misdirect they did where you think, oh, Professor Xavier's like he's finally
warped
flipped.
and he's bad.
Exactly, because the Magneto thing, and it turns out, oh no, they've just spawned this other entity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like something separate.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Thor pulls Xavier out, just makes him more powerful.
Great.
Damn it.
Yep. And so that, I mean, it kind of like after that battle, things kind of slow down a little bit. People are trying to think of a way to defeat Onslaught. Xavier chooses to go talk to him by himself, and the X-Men are like, no, we won't let you do that. And so it's just Xavier and the X-Men fighting Onslaught for a while. Obviously, they're overwhelmed, so the rest of like the Avengers and side Marvel heroes continue to show up and try to fight.
For finally showing up.
Well, okay, to be fair, they didn't know, and as soon as they found out, they rushed to the danger. So
I call bullshit.
No.
Can I just add, the pacing on this is so good, I think.
Yeah.
Because in certain ways you can say, well, the story kind of slowed down. But what was really cool, and I was just coming up when this thing came out, is that Onslaught was like an occupation at that point. He also at some point gets all the Sentinels and turns the Sentinels against people.
Yeah.
So all of New York is like, and I guess the United States or whatever, but it's all of our favorite characters like living in this like wasteland,
Yep.
Trying to figure out how they're going to fight something this powerful.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I picture it as like a video game end game, like boss battle. It's like phase 1. This isn't my final form. He just keeps getting more and more powerful.
I just ripped a person out of your body.
I'm stronger now.
How did that make your health bar go up?
Which I think is an awesome scene too, by the way. Like, that's not just because it's Thor related, but like they all kind of attack Onslaught, and you really feel like they're gonna do it.
Yeah.
And it's so weird too that this story, even just talking about it now, it's so good. Why is it not compiled into one thing?
Because there's a lot of bad.
I know.
too.
When it comes to recommendations, I had to think about it for a while.
Yeah, I mean, that's
There's
fine,
like
though.
the road to Onslaught. There's like 70 of them.
I'm
is
glad
true.
you picked this because I actually think it is underrated.
Yeah.
Because the problem is it took place in time in comics in the 90s when characters were just like there's a lot of stuff we look back. It's like the hair from the 90s or the shoulder pads women wear, where it's like
something you kind of cringe when you look back at.
Exactly. Like if you guys don't know, Onslaught looks really I don't want to say dumb, but like he's just very.
He looks
90s.
Exaggerated.
Yeah.
Everything about him.
It's like a gigantic body armory thing with Magneto's helmet looking stuff.
Big mech. Just big thing. I don't like his outfit, but
okay, so we'll rewrite his aesthetic for future adaptations. Hopefully he'll look a little cooler.
Hopefully he never comes back. He's awful.
Well, he still pops in every once in a while.
Recently.
Yeah.
Actually. Somewhat recently.
Yeah. It kind of accumulates at the end, big battle, and it doesn't look good for the longest time. He just keeps absorbing more heroes. I mean, big names too, like the Hulk is gone, he absorbs Scarlet Witch. Although Scarlet Witch doesn't make him more powerful, side note. They think it had something to do with her hexing powers.
It's a weird...
you got jinxed for eating me.
So cursed.
He'd also absorbed X-Man.
Yeah.
Like one of the most powerful telepaths.
All of them?
No.
I'm
okay, yeah. So he's got all this power, and I have to say, as whatever criticisms you have of this crossover, that issue that you're talking about, the final showdown with Onslaught, is just awesome.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of it. And I think the mutants were going to give him his power back if he absorbed the mutant.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but they're trying to get rid of the Avengers and the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, Scarlet Witch is pretty important to the Avengers. Like, well, her hex powers make her temporarily not a mutant. Problem solved.
I mean, he just keeps absorbing more and more heroes that for the longest time were thought to be dead in universe. Eventually, gets too much. He explodes, actually. It's
it's a typical thing of eating too much. You explode.
Boom. And so those heroes, though, that he absorbed would have died had it not been for the most powerful person in the Marvel Universe, Franklin Richards, creating a pocket universe that becomes, I think it's Counter Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of bridges like Earth 616 and Counter Earth. He like carries that pocket dimension with all of those heroes.
Too much math for
around
me.
With them. Yeah, I know. Dimensions, you know. And so that gap that the heroes left led to the rise of the Thunderbolts.
That's true.
And they're like, we don't have heroes here. We need heroes. We'll be heroes.
Everybody in Marvel's Earth thinks that all the heroes have just died in the awful Onslaught thing.
They just got eaten.
Yep.
And
they're in a pocket dimension, though. It's like he puts it in his pocket. They're safe there.
Well, and I
literally,
think
right?
Literally,
yeah. Yeah, no, he does.
Everybody thinks it's a ball.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
like
I remember.
Blue, shiny
I
ball.
remember that scene too because he's like sitting and he has like the ball and you see Reed Richards and Sue Storm and there's
that's fine.
Cool ball.
And tragically, though, this leads to like more anti-mutant sentiment, obviously. But it's so sad because it's the exact opposite of what Xavier and Magneto would have wanted. And that's kind of like the aftermath is just desolation, a regression in mutant rights.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really sad.
They think of him as a mutant, but I don't even know if Onslaught qualifies. I guess he was born of them, but
at least the general public blames on like mutants for this happening. Yeah. So there's like this wave of anti-mutant sentiment, which
I think just because he was born from mutants, or maybe the general public doesn't even know
I can't
or
remember
understand.
exactly.
I think it's Magneto.
Yeah.
And
He
I can't
does have the
remember
colors.
exactly what act it is, but it like pushes forth like something that's like pre-registration, but something very similar.
The mutant registration.
Yeah. So
I don't know if it's
that
there.
one.
There is a mutant registration act. I'm not sure if it's this story.
Yeah, exactly. But no, like it gives rise to that wave that eventually becomes the Mutant Registration Act in the future.
And I don't think we've said it yet, but that it was Marvel doing a thing called Heroes Reborn as well. So from their perspective, the heroes are gone, and that's the in-story reason. But also, Marvel had paid a bunch of very popular image artists and writers to redo the Avengers and the Fantastic Four because they were not selling at all. And so the idea was like, let's just completely revamp them.
So let's get rid of them for a while when we bring them back.
Absolutely. In a certain way, it was a critical disaster, but financially it did actually work.
Yeah.
So, kind of cool.
Yeah. Thanks, Onslaught Saga.
You did some good.
But yeah, that's why I chose it. It was kind of just an interesting thing that led to kind of in-universe cataclysmic things, and also Charles Xavier, one of the main characters, my personal fave. So. Okay, so wrapping up Onslaught Saga. We're going chronologically, I think. Unintentionally, but that's how we did it. So I think Jered has the next one, chronologically.
The next one that we're going to spotlight. My spotlight is Annihilation. Ever heard of it?
I've heard of annihilating things.
Well, there was a movie that came out recently about 8.
Natalie Portman, right?
Yeah, it was the one with Natalie Portman.
That is the name of it. Well, anyway, this is actually well done. So this is no, I didn't see it. I'm sure
really
it's
good.
fantastic. Is it really good?
Yeah.
Oh, when did you see it?
I've read the book.
Oh,
there's 3.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. Yeah. So this is one of my favorite comic book stories of all time. And it pains me that more people haven't heard about it. Is a work of genius. I just want to name some people that did it. Keith Giffen, Dan Abnett, Andy Lanning. It's a space masterpiece and some outstanding art by Andrea DeVidio. Anyway, okay, so here's your basic story of Annihilation. The corner of the positive matter universe in Marvel meets and begins to overlap into the negative zone. The negative zone is a very important sort of dimension for the Marvel Universe's history and cosmology and everything like that. There's where they meet is called the Crunch. Right? It's
sorry.
No, it's okay. I understand you don't respect Marvel. Anyway, so I knew that already. Anyway, so
they could have called it the overlap.
So we can maybe rename stuff after. So it's called the Crunch, and it's a tremendous power source. And in the middle, seemingly out of nowhere, as far as our universe is concerned, a gigantic invasion bursts out of that universe, led by a character, old Fantastic Four villain named Annihilus. Annihilus is an insectoid like sort of thing that happens to have a cosmic control rod that makes him cosmically powerful. He's a big bad, dark side kind of feeling level.
But he was specifically a Fantastic Four villain?
That's how he started. Now, Annihilation, so Annihilus related, right? Yeah, you see that?
You just got that?
So he is
disappointed.
Yeah. So, this sort of revamps him. It makes him more powerful and everything like that. Now, the Annihilation wave is what essentially when his fleet explodes out of the negative zone, and it's called like the Annihilation wave. Think of locusts on a cosmic scale.
Ugh.
All these insects and insect-like ships that they're in destroy everything in their wake. They destroy the Nova Corps, I think 7 days into their invasion. And the way that this story reads, and what I love it so much, if you've read World War Z, it feels very much, it's a war anthology in a sense, and it's sort of told at times, the narration, especially in past tense, like survivors. They read, or they talk about each day as just the number of days since the Annihilation event. So Nova Corps, if you don't know, as I think we've mentioned before, is similar to the Green Lantern Corps. And so the peacekeeping operation, think of it like the UN is just destroyed when invaders kill everyone. And what's really cool about the story is it sort of begins at after a huge cosmic disaster. So rather than a kind of lead up to some climax they have to rally from, it just begins from that. And so, several characters are killed in this. And yeah, it's just so good. I can't. And so,
are you going to leave us on the cliffhanger?
Which characters?
Oh well, I'll tell you who's killed. But so some of them, and this will be important in a second. They're characters, if you're not a sort of stalwart Marvel fan, you're probably not that familiar with. Quasar is one of the first major heroes to be killed. He's a sort of cosmic, very similar to the Green Lanterns in terms of his power set and things like that. He and I was going to say the sort of our main protagonist is Nova. Before this is completely reinvented him. Before this, he was just a sort of like happy-go-lucky, almost Spider-Man in space floating around. He happens to be the last of the Nova Corps, the only one left, except for the Nova Corps World Mind, which is like this great supercomputer that is all of Xandar's culture and cognition and everything like that, and the entirety of the Nova Force. So imagine again the Green Lantern, everything that powers them. Or if you saw the the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, remember all those guys, Nova Force, all the ships and stuff like that. Imagine all of the power that they all had combined into one person. So you end up getting this sort of Silver Surfer level character, but he's just seen an awful genocide. And it's him and the surviving characters rallying and creating a sort of defensive front to fight back the annihilation wave. Now, no one on Earth knows what's going on because it's all happening
I was just about to say,
space.
I was like, they have to hold the line, right? Because if it gets to Earth.
And Richard Rider, that's Nova. His name is Dick Rider. That's unfortunate. It just happens to be his name.
Oh my God.
I don't know. Why did they do that? Anyway. Why did they do that? Anyway.
Hey, it would have been fine if you didn't, keep talking.
I'm not the first
about
person that's... Anyway. His motivation outside of basic revenge on Annihilus and all his forces that have destroyed all these... the billions upon billions of lives is to prevent the annihilation wave from getting to Earth. Remember, the annihilation wave is just a universe's worth of
locusts.
Basically insectoid creatures that have
the plague is coming. Trying to stop it.
Annihilus is because he's conquered that entire universe and he's brought it to bear here. Not incidentally, he just did it because the positive matter universe was spilling over into the negative zone. He took it as an act of cosmic aggression and decided
you attacked us first.
Everybody's got to die.
Why was it doing that? Why was it overlapping?
It's just how it works. It's
kind of like how
the
continents are drifting.
Exactly. Or how that's a good.
I didn't know if because he destroyed all that stuff in the negative one, it just made room for the positive one to go in.
Picturing it as like tectonic plates at this point.
Yeah, very similar. Or like I think if it's like a wave that crashes down on like a shore, it just kind of has to happen. And they refer to cosmic consonants a lot over the course of the thing. So you get the sense that it was just a natural way that the universe
just
interact
happens
or whatever. But he happens to have newly conquered the negative zone and it's getting like overcome by the positive matter universe, which he doesn't like. What's interesting about him though is that he is terrified of everything. And his goal is to kill all other life forms.
Because he's scared.
Because it's the only way to be safe.
That's hilarious.
Absolutely.
That's hilarious.
That's like a Bubble Boy extreme.
So here's what's interesting about Annihilation to me is that the structure of the story is very much like in this anthology format. Most of it is the big event happens, and then the rest are 3 or 4 characters that how their stories get sort of fleshed out as they're living post annihilation. And then the final act where they all go and fight Annihilus. It brings back characters and sort of, and I really see Annihilation as a kind of like, taking Marvel's cosmic world and putting it into the modern era. Like redefining their cosmic landscape. Ronan the Accuser, Super Skrull, who else? Firelord, the Silver Surfer. There's a number of characters. Peter Quill is his reappearance. So it's interesting to think about the success of the story. It was very critically well received. If it hadn't been for that, there's a good chance that certain characters like Ronan would have never been in the movie. It's possible Guardians of the Galaxy never would have happened. But anyway, so it feels very much like a war film. It's written very much like that. And it's very realistic and grim in that respect.
I really like that the main protagonists aren't the typical characters that you would think of when you think of Marvel. It's not carried by the names of the characters. It's like these minor characters in some regards that are like elevated.
I'm glad you mentioned that because it's happening at the same time as another aforementioned thing, Civil War.
Mute. Yeah. He's gonna talk shit.
Well, I am gonna talk shit. I'll talk shit in a second. But before I do it, I want to mention that so a lot of superhero stories, they just set up drama or conflict to resolve that drama, but they're not really about anything, or not, at least not clearly. Sometimes it's just a cool adventure. In this case, the theme of survival ends up coming up a lot. Nova has tremendous survival's guilt the entire time, and he gets to play that sort of. He has to accept the fact that he's made it, and all his friends are dead, and he has to like overcome and take on the burden of responsibility despite all this like PTSD and stuff like that. And incidentally, the villain in here, Annihilus, is deeply worried about the fact that he's going to die or whatever. And so he's destroying the entire universe on that basis. It was really good. But what you said is, I have it written down. It's like, I was
Yeah.
going to say that there's something really impressive about a story where it has almost no major characters. As a matter of fact, the characters that you've heard that I said that you knew probably
Were minor characters at the time.
Thanos and Silver Surfer are the most popular characters in there, and they have ancillary roles at best. Thanos ends up being like a weird like partner of Annihilus. They just like kind of is interested. He ends up being a perverse like voyeur of the whole
that's
thing.
one form of population control.
Yeah, exactly. He just thought that the world got really boring, and he thought Annihilus would like shake it up or whatever. But the other thing, like I said, there are several deaths in this. Thanos gets killed. Quasar got killed. Annihilus gets killed.
Wait, how did Thanos get?
Well, he has a relationship with Lady Death quite a bit. So he kind of moves in and out of death quite a bit in the Marvel universe. In this, it turns out this is the reinvention of Drax. Before this story, Drax was a Hulk-like character. He would fly around. He was super powerful, and he was mentally challenged. He had been like the IQ of like an 8-year-old or something like that. So that's how the story for him begins. He gets killed by Paybok, the Power Squirrel. We all know Paybok. Anyway, so he gets reborn as this sleek, stealth-like assassin. The Drax in this is cooler than any Drax you're ever going to see. It's almost disappointing in the movie that he ends up being kind of a doof again, because he's like this awesome ninja assassin dude. Anyway, so he turns out is perfectly calibrated to kill Thanos. He's like a Thanos killing thing, and he punches his hand through Thanos' chest and has his heart
God.
holding it on the other side.
Iconic.
It's a great image. But here's what's great about the moments in Annihilation. They're all organic to the story and completely earned. They all make sense. And the reason I mention that is that Civil War was happening at the same time. Nothing but popular characters, nothing but absolute giants in terms of like the sales. And all the moments in that, the big moments, feel completely editorially
Like
mandated.
contrived. That's why I think we get the out of character actions on both of the sides.
And it's probably why the Civil War did better too, because you had all those bigger names in it.
Yeah.
So Marvel was definitely marketing that.
But that's the crazy thing, is that Annihilation is critically better received and has, at the time, pretty significant, like they launch a second Annihilation Conquest, which involves the Phalanx and Ultron. It's not nearly as popular. It wasn't as, I think, it wasn't as inspired. But either way, it had none of the marketing that Civil War did, and it's so much better. I just, and like I said, none of the characters are even, household names or something.
I like that aspect a lot.
But yeah, with the Civil War, the Peter Parker being unmasked has nothing to do with the story. Didn't need to happen. They create a context, but it doesn't really change anything. And then Captain America being killed at the end is completely like tacked on, has very little to do with the story.
They had to have a big death in this big crossover.
That's so annoying about Civil War, is that's what it feels like. It's like, oh, we forgot to kill a major character.
I mean,
kill Captain America.
That's how it was. I mean, it's once the 2000s hit, it seemed like that's what they were doing.
Death everywhere.
Yeah. I think a bad thing in a crossover is when you can feel the editorial mandates in the story. Mm-hmm. It's like, if I'm reading a story,
that's just bad writing in general.
Exactly. But we know, comic fans know the tropes of comics so well that they have to work hard to like cover that up, because it's like, oh yeah, it's a number one. Not because they have an original story idea, but they just know number ones sell better or something like that.
Yeah. I think that's especially apparent in deaths. Sometimes you're like, I can tell they just spun the wheel of character names, and whoever it landed on, they're like, boom, dead.
Let's put a wheel of most shocking deaths.
Yeah.
And then spin it.
But so I guess just to finish this off, I think it's cool too, because Marvel's cosmic world, we mentioned DC's magic before. I think they're comparable. I think that Marvel certainly has magical characters, but DC has really developed that as a sort of zone or world. Similarly with the cosmic stuff, Marvel's always had a kind of strong cosmic roster, an entire landscape that also takes place irrespective, and I think that's the important thing, irrespective of the rest of the universe. So you get a sense that there's cool shit going on in the stars
all the time
that Tony Stark doesn't even know about.
Yeah.
In a similar way with DC, there's magical goings on that Superman really just isn't privy to. So it feels like its own corner or whatever. And I feel like this very much like re-cemented Marvel's cosmic theater as, oh, this can be really cool. It's really got a lot of story potential here.
It's just unfortunate that it came out when it did.
Yeah, absolutely. I still, again, I think fans still appreciate it or what have you, but yeah. So that's Annihilation, the greatest comic book event to ever take place. No.
Everybody's entitled to their wrong opinion. The one I'm going to be talking about today definitely is not my favorite, but I think it's important. And it does tie in well with your guys's, because yours, Kayla, deals with the X-Men. Mm-hmm. Jered's was with Nova. Mine starts with Nova. So it is Avengers versus X-Men. The beginning scene kind of really does play out just like the whole Infinity War, the movie, and the comics and everything, because you have Nova crashing down onto Earth saying, "It's coming." What is coming?
Ominous.
Yeah, of course, the Phoenix Force. The Phoenix Force is back. Anytime big event currently has to do with X-Men, it's always the Phoenix Force. But this time, since Jean is not there, it is coming after Hope Summers. So,
oh no.
Yeah. I like Hope a lot. She's really interesting. She's considered the messiah of the X-Men because she was the first person born with the mutant gene after there was no more mutants.
After M-Day.
Yeah, M-Day. And that has to do with all mutants being depowered. I mean, I guess that's the right way to say it, or at least most of them, except for the mutants that are on Utopia, which there's a whole slew of them, but you still have the regulars like Wolverine, Storm, Cyclops.
It's like less than 200, I think.
Yeah, their numbers went way down. But with Hope being born and she has that ability, she's the messiah because nobody knows who her father is. The last name is misleading because Cable is the one that finds her. Cable is, related to the Summers. So he's her adoptive father. So that's where she gets the last name Summers. Mm-hmm. Her mom, I can't even remember who her mom is. Yeah, Spalding.
Last name,
yeah, it was Spalding.
She was a tennis ball.
Nobody knows who the father is, so Messiah also plays into the Immaculate Conception thing. Mm-hmm. And she's super overpowered, I think.
So her and, Richard's Franklin should get together.
Yeah, because her ability is, if it's a mutant power, she can mimic it. So that just,
But she keeps it. So unlike Rogue, where she has to touch them and then she only keeps it for a while, she just stocks that away. She's very much like, if you watched Heroes, anybody seen the first season of Heroes? Peter in that season where
I thought you were going to say Siler, like she had to cut open their brains.
No, just
what did he ever do with the brains? Like, did he just open it and just go...
This can't be a Game of Thrones podcast. It can't be a Heroes podcast either, Noah.
Yeah.
I was just curious. Anyway, so the Phoenix is coming for somebody that resembles Jean Grey, which happens to be Hope Summers at the time. X-Men are all living in Utopia, which is an island off of San Francisco, I believe. Somewhere over there. Anyway, so you have all the mutants there. People start finding out that the Phoenix is coming. So you have the Avengers that find out about it, and they're like, we can't have this. They meet with world leaders. All of that stuff. They set up measures to kind of stop this. They find out that Hope is the new host of the Phoenix. And it's coming directly for her. So you have Cyclops and the Avengers saying, maybe we should let her embrace the Phoenix because the Phoenix also rebirths things. Mm-hmm. Maybe it will make mutants come back to what they were before. But then you have the Avengers, reasonably so, saying we need to figure out how to stop this. We need to take her, put her in a safe place, and try to stop the Phoenix. When has that
fascinating, actually.
When has that ever happened, though? You have a giant firebird that just flies by a planet and everything dies. It gets reborn, but everything dies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were speaking of guilt, like survivor's guilt with Nova. So this Nova is different. It's Sam. What's his last name? I always forget.
Alexander.
Yeah, Sam Alexander, 2 first names. And anyway, but he sees the Phoenix coming, so he leaves. It's Terrax, I believe, his planet. He leaves, but he sees his planet getting annihilated. But you see Nova kind of start crying because he was trying to warn them. And he was like, well, I guess I gotta go because you guys aren't listening to me.
Any character named Nova is just destined to be alone.
that moment, too, is like showing how powerful the Phoenix Force is. If you don't, because Terrax is like the Silver Surfer. He's one of Galactus's ex-heralds. Super powerful, and he gets wiped out like it's not even a speed bump.
Yeah, I think his axe is the only thing left for some reason, and it's stuck in the ground, but then you see a plant sprouting from it. So it's
he'll be back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's not a plant. I was just saying.
No,
he's growing back from the earth.
He became Groot. No, but I mean he's like so many characters. He's just been killed so many times.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, whenever he died, I was just like, that's fine. Cool. But anyway, so back to the story. So that's where this whole conflict comes in. This is the story I was talking about that Marvel tends to do that's different. So you have these two teams with opposing ideas. One wants to do this way, the other one wants to do this way. Captain America's obviously leading the Avengers side. Cyclops is leading the X-Men side.
All for the sake of one little girl.
One little girl and the giant Firebird. As the Phoenix gets closer, the abilities or the fire starts coming from Hope, and she's starting to realize like, oh, it is coming for me. But you have the standoff on this beach, on Utopia, and you essentially have Cyclops and a couple other people like Emma Frost. Then you have the Avengers, you have Captain America. So they're kind of off by themselves, and Emma Frost is using her, telepathy
To listen to what they're
to
saying.
listen to what they're saying. And they're arguing with each other. And essentially, I can't remember what the line was, and it's killing me. Do you remember what the line was that started the fight?
Oh.
Die, Mutie.
Yeah. It was something along the lines of...
Cap, no!
Yeah, it was something along the lines of like, Cap was like, you do realize what this will do. And then Scott is being a jackass at this point.
Blasts him, right?
Yeah, he's not really listening to him. He's just like, no, she's going to save all of mutant kind. And, Captain America's just like, well, we can all work together and like figure something out.
So I can't tell what side you're on, Noah.
Well, at this point, like, there's some exposition leading up to it, and you have Scott dealing with a lot of internal issues.
Yeah.
So you can kind of see that he's not really what his character normally is, and he's what?
I would say there's, it's like at this point, at least the reasonable side versus at least the understandable side, with Cyclops, you were saying.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So that's where the fight breaks out, and you have all these people fighting each other. Once it starts, you have the X-Men side, and Emma Frost is like, oh, I guess we're doing this. And then you have the Avengers up in their little spaceship up there. And they're like, are we really gonna fight the X-Men here?
Do we have to?
Yeah. Yeah, so they start fighting. You find out that Thor, the big guns and everything, are up in space. They believe they're waiting by the moon or somewhere in empty space. They're about to fight the Phoenix, or at least hold her off. Or it off. I don't know if it's a girl. I think it would be.
Gender fluid.
Yeah. They're going to hold it off. When does that ever work either? I mean, it's at least hold it back. So then essentially what happens is you have Wolverine that's kind of working on the Avengers side. And he has his own beliefs that we need to just kill her. We need to kill Hope because there will be no Hope. I mean, there will be no Phoenix, the host for the Phoenix to go to. So to fast forward a bit, because there's a lot of little tiny things and people fighting and stuff happening. They end up on the moon. The moon has this atmosphere now. I think they call it the blue side of the moon. But they all can breathe there. So humans can walk freely on the moon.
It's the blue area of the moon.
It's blue area, whatever.
That's goals. We need that.
So Hope kind of teams up with Wolverine because Wolverine's like, oh, I'll help you, stop this thing. But Wolverine's acting as a double agent, and he lets the Avengers know where Hope is because they're all trying to get to her. So then another standoff on the moon against Avengers and X-Men. But this time the Phoenix is already here. So it's Tony Stark, and I believe it was Hank Pym, that made this machine that they hoped could stop the Phoenix. It's this big, giant, like Megazord looking thing that Tony gets into. So when he shoots this...
That's his solution for everything.
Get into a suit.
Yeah, I mean, that's
my
what
marriage,
he is.
Yeah.
My marriage is crumbling. I need a marriage-fixing suit.
So he shoots the Phoenix with this giant beam of whatever they made. And it doesn't destroy the Phoenix, it splinters the Phoenix. And these pieces fall into some of the X-Men, which are known as the Phoenix 5, which is terrifying because now you have not one Phoenix, you have 5 of them.
It's not great.
This is like the turning point of the story.
Yes.
In a lot of,
Yeah, I mean, for the X-Men, technically.
Yeah.
You have Namor that became one, Cyclops, Emma Frost, Magic, and Colossus. Colossus was an odd choice for me, but I liked it. I liked the way he looked. For some reason, whenever the Phoenix went into all of them, they all their costumes changed to have like a Phoenix motif.
They did a magical girl transformation sequence.
This was also arbitrary. Like they never really explain why it's those 5.
Yeah.
They're just standing around.
Yeah, they happen to be there at the
closest.
right. Yeah, and they're all mutants, so
Should
I
have
guess
been
that
like
makes sense.
Toad.
Which he's in it
Maggot,
too.
and,
You see Toad for some weird reason randomly. He's like a janitor, and and he goes to like Cerebra and he like puts the helmet on, and that's it. That's all you see of him. I was like,
But
what?
he doesn't have telepathy, so
Yeah.
he doesn't. But it's gonna make him like gooier. or
What you
something.
doing there, Toad?
Yeah, it was such a weird thing. Anyway, so you have these 5 mutants that obviously wanted to use the Phoenix to rebuild mutantdom, and that's what they set out to do essentially. So it's actually a cool thing because you think that they're the villains, or at least the wrong sides on this, and all 5 of them go to different parts of the world and they provide unlimited food for everybody, unlimited, clean water for everybody. What else do they fix? They make the world a utopia. Yeah.
Not just the
That's
island.
nice.
Yeah, and it's really nice. And then you have this turning point where Namor invades Wakanda, because why not? He destroys a lot of Wakanda.
Yikes.
Which is another turning point in the thing, because then Namor is defeated, but then that part of the Phoenix goes into the Phoenix 4 at this point, makes them more powerful.
Oh, so it
as
doesn't
you-
find a new host. It just
Goes to the ones that it's already there. Yeah. So I believe at this point you have Hope. She's in Kunlun. Is that how you say it?
That's how I'm going to say it, because Kunlun sounds way worse.
Yeah.
no, that's how you say it. Yeah.
This is the mystical city that Iron Fist gets his powers and abilities from.
Yeah.
Yes. So you have her in Kunlun, and they're trying to hide her there, and they believe that she trains as the Iron Fist, that she's going to somehow be able to reject the Phoenix Force. And then, kind of side note, because I didn't even mention her all yet, Scarlet Witch plays a huge part in this story, and she played a huge part in the reason why X-Men are depowered in the first place.
Out of nowhere.
I mean, you did have like a kind of like sad reaction whenever you had Miss Marvel and Spider-Woman meet up with Scarlet Witch. They're even like, where did you come from? Like, she's just fighting.
I guess the thing, they're afraid of her. That's the weird thing about, because she basically almost destroyed all mutants. They're still even infested with the Phoenix, if that's the right word, infested. They're still kind of creeped out by this, like,
Well, not Miss
species
Marvel
enemy.
and Spider-Woman. They're embracing her, and they're like, hey, why don't you go to the mansion, like where the Avengers are hiding out at, and let's kind of get everybody back on like a
No,
good...
I mean the mutants are afraid of her.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
And they're like, let's get everybody back, on the same page, and everybody, and be nice to each other. Who opens the door when they get there? Vision. Her husband that hates her, which is a really weird thing.
Yikes.
He essentially tells her, like, this isn't your home. You don't have a home anymore. What do you think you're doing? And it's really sad. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure I threw that out there. So culminating and getting to the end of this story, you could see where it's going. So some of the Phoenix 5 gets defeated. There's only 2 left, which is Emma Frost and Cyclops. The big climactic thing to this is you have Hope and Scarlet Witch, and then her training from Kunlun and everything, using all of that to essentially refuse the Phoenix. That's what all of this led up to. All of this fight.
To one big nope.
Yeah, but one of the biggest things that comes from this is Cyclops kills Xavier, which during this whole thing, I'm like, oh, nobody really died. And then they do that, and I'm like, you killed him.
They have a confrontation at
Yeah.
the end. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just, I mean, Xavier finally at the end was just like, well, I guess I should stop some of this or whatever. And then the confrontation ended up in him killing him, Cyclops killing Xavier.
No repercussions for that, I'm sure.
Onslaught 2.
You thought.
Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, so it was really weird. This one was a little odd because you had Scarlet Witch kind of floating in and out, and she becomes this, like always with her character, this Omega kind of wild card that they have. And she's the answer to everything, but usually she's not. And so I thought that was a really weird aspect of this comic.
Xavier, though. I don't remember anything else you said.
I'm sure, anybody living in that world would be like, oh, Charles Xavier's dead again. He's
Aw.
dead yet again.
You know what's sad is I like Cyclops and Xavier too, so I'm just like, this sucks for me either way.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting because you had the confrontation with Cyclops and Xavier, and Cyclops is just consumed with the Phoenix and his mental state before that. So he talks to Xavier and he's like, this is what you wanted. you wanted utopia. We're going to bring, mutants where they should be, and we're helping everybody. And of course, Xavier's just like, this is not
the way.
Yeah, this is not the way.
And I think this story makes a lot more sense in the context of things that had happened beforehand. And that's what's difficult about these constant crossovers is that, they really, any one story that you pick and try to take out of context is so dependent on the things that have happened beforehand. It's kind of, so we talked a little bit about, Scott Summers was, really driven to the brink because he felt like he had to protect what was left, the very few mutants that were left. They faced extinction. And so, he's reaching at straws to think the Phoenix is going to help. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, a lot of the stories prior to this with the X-Men had been about really the Professor X not being such a great guy. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily bad, but that he had covered things up and stuff like that. So their confrontation at the end is way more sensible. Mm-hmm. But if you just read the story, it's like, why
would you do that?
Yeah. Why do you kill him? And then, I was saying another thing, and tell me how you felt about this. It felt like with the Phoenix, it wasn't clear. The X-Men, the Phoenix 5, it's like, are they still themselves? Are they purely the Phoenix?
Well,
like,
so
where does it stop?
that is interesting that you say that, because there's this moment with Emma Frost being this unreasonably overpowered person normally. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's kind of using her mental powers, and with the Phoenix, everything's amplified, and she's listening to everybody. She knows everything about who knows how much. Mm-hmm. And she has this weird confrontation with Cyclops, and they're talking about it, and they're like, is this right? Is this not right? Cyclops is like, yes, we're doing what we should be doing, and blah, blah, blah. And he starts walking out, and she's still talking. And she's trying to tell him, like, I've been listening to everybody. We're not helping anything. Nobody's believing that we're helping anything. They're seeing us as these bad people. Mm-hmm. Everybody's bad, because she's hearing everybody. Mm-hmm. So he walks out, and she's like, no, don't go, because I'm afraid what I'll do next. And then the next thing you see is her going to some random person's house, interrupting their family dinner, killing this father and husband in front of them because he did something bad.
Oh my God.
And she knows about it, and she was like, yeah, you're bad, and we know it.
I can't imagine having any part of Phoenix within you means you're not corrupted in some way.
It feels like with the Phoenix,
vice versa.
Yeah, it feels like with the Phoenix that it amplifies kind of who you are, your ideals you have, but to the wrong direction.
Sure.
So like Emma Frost, she doesn't like misogynistic men, and she doesn't like any of that, abusers in any type of way. So I'm assuming the Phoenix kind of makes that passion even bigger, and it's like, the only way you can stop this abuser is to kill him. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, let me go kill him. So
and it's really weird, because back in the original Dark Phoenix saga, the notion is that I don't know why the Phoenix wants to bond with anybody, because it's bad for both. The creation of the Dark Phoenix was because Jean Grey's emotions fucked it up. Mm-hmm. It's, all the depression and anxiety and trauma that is just one with being a person for this cosmic force. So I don't know why, like,
the Phoenix keeps trying.
We need a cosmic, like, restraining order. Like, anytime, it's a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, and there is another cool thing about this one where you have, which I believe this is the only thing that I really side with Cyclops on, is when him and Captain America keep arguing on their confrontations, he tells, Captain America, he's like, when have you ever cared about what's happening with the X-Men? Mm-hmm. You guys have never helped us with anything, and now because you think that there's a big threat, you think you know what's best when you haven't been around for anything.
Yeah, like I love Captain America so much, but one of his things is that he can be a little self-righteous.
Very narrow-sided.
And again, like from Scott's point of view, he's seeing his people like dying. He thinks that this might be a solution, and so when Cap's counter argument doesn't involve mutant kind and their plight at all, it's not going to really resonate with Scott.
Yeah, and that's the side that I liked a lot about this, because there was things on both sides where, like, I can agree with both of them. Just one happens to be not in the right state of mind, and then also becomes the Phoenix, so it's just not good. But I mean, one of the good conclusions to this one is that Captain America decides to build a team that mixes both of them. So I think that is kind of what he did listen to Scott, and he's like, okay, we'll involve you, but you're going to come on our team. We'll involve you, but
you're one of us.
Yeah.
Now.
Well, to be fair, Scott isn't, because he's treated like a terrorist and imprisoned.
Yeah. I mean, which
his brother,
rightfully so.
They're like, Havoc, you can be on the team.
Do we have any more summers? Any more summer mutants? Oh, okay, yeah.
Wait, are they blasty? They gotta be blasty. They blasty, get in here. And also, they Uncanny Avengers is the title that spawns. I just love it so much. So I just wanted to say that.
The team that they made at the end of it.
Yeah, Rick Remender's take on it, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Phoenix is coming, Avengers say no, X-Men say yes, and then a fight, and then all hope has to be like, no!
This is interesting to me, though, because we haven't talked a lot about this. What's your feeling? What's your takeaway now? Because I feel like this is the first one where we've done where it hasn't been like, this is my favorite, you got to check it out.
Yeah.
So you're kind of on the fence. Where are you?
I'm on the fence with, like I said earlier, I wanted to do it because I feel like Marvel does do a lot of hero teams versus each other. And I thought they're two big staples in their universe, Avengers and X-Men, was interesting. I had read it prior, or some of the tie-ins. I just think as a concept is interesting, but I think the reason why they fought makes complete sense. Yeah. I like why they did it. I like that there's a lot of stuff in this that I didn't like, but I like the initial reason why they did it, as opposed to some of the other heroes versus heroes. I didn't agree
I like that
with.
the build-up is a moral dilemma. Again, kind of like you see in Civil War, but I like it even better here, actually, because I don't feel like people are acting out of character.
Yeah. And even though Scott's not like himself, he's still himself because of what he went through.
Yeah.
So it just makes more sense that he's there. And there was a good line by Namor where after they've kind of started...
Imperious Rex?
No, he said that like 7 times.
That's what he does.
Anyway, no, there's a part where after Cyclops and the Phoenix Five have kind of taken over a lot of things, Cyclops is making a decision that Namor doesn't agree with, and Emma Frost, and Namor says, like, you're a good leader, but you're not a good emperor. And I'm just like, oh, this is getting weird, guys, now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I did like it overall. Like, I mean, there was a lot of writers in this. I think like 5 writers. You have Brian Michael Bendis, Jason Aaron, other ones,
etc.
Yeah,
and co.
Yeah, so I mean, as you read it, it just gets a little like, oh, I can see where some writers weren't.
It's like
good
conceptually,
at this.
if you take a step back, you're like, good. If you look a little closer, you're like, this is a little messy, but I like what it was doing.
It was also a long time coming, I gotta say. Like it took them a long time to do this. It's surprising it took this long, I think, because there'd been some Avengers X-Men stuff, but like I want a sequel too, by the way.
You got the Avengers versus Inhumans.
No, X-Men versus Inhumans, and it was good.
Oh, no, that's what I meant. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't want to talk crap about it or anything like that. But no, I feel like this was, they did some good and bad in this, but I think those two franchises should go at it more. Like, it would make sense to.
Yeah.
Maybe. A lot of marital problems in this one.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I mean, okay, real quick. The one thing that I couldn't understand, maybe I needed to read something that involved it, but I mean, you have Black Panther on one side and then Storm on the other. Guess which side they're on. But they're about to fight, and because both of their sides are fighting, they're married, by the way.
Yeah.
And then Storm is like, this is why we have a marriage counselor. It's like, because you're gonna kill it, just don't be married. Like, what?
Yeah.
Just don't.
Well, the thing, I think it's supposed to have that Civil War feeling of like brother against brother.
I know. I just
versus wife.
It's a little chewy to me. Like, it's been done, and I'm just like, okay.
Here's what I think happened. They were doing this crossover, and then the details occurred to them like, oh wait,
they're married.
Black Panther and Storm are married. How are we gonna handle that?
Well, they could have just done something like with Wolverine.
Yeah.
I mean, Wolverine was kind of doing what was he thought was best. So he was on this weird third little team.
But if you do that enough, it's like, well, they don't even have sides anymore. They're all like, well, I don't know, little column A, little column X.
Column X. Yeah. Gotcha.
See what I did there?
Yeah, so that is our Marvel crossovers. Comic book recommendation time.
Your favorite part.
All right, so we're going to recommend some comics that either have to do with what we talked about or don't, or whatever.
I was like, I think I'm the only one that's like gonna recommend something directly related.
Mine does.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Surprise, surprise.
Jered doesn't.
But he has an extensive knowledge of the Marvel Universe
Gonna
that we
recommend the good stuff.
Yikes.
So the one I was going to recommend, I kind of mentioned it, or the story has to do with it, which was the depowering of the mutants. And the start of that, or where that came from, was House of M. So Brian Michael Bendis obviously wrote that one too. Like, he writes almost everything that I've talked about in Marvel. So in this one, it's essentially Scarlet Witch driven, and she's trying to bring back her children. In that, mutants are depowered. I'm not going to spoil it. It's pretty good. It's a little crazy and also really weird to see Scarlet Witch do some of that stuff, but it's really good. House of M, Brian Michael Bendis. Kayla.
Yeah, mine is Essential X-Men number 47. It's entitled Onslaught, the Nightmare Begins. And one of the taglines is, "'Tis nothing but a barren wasteland." So you know it's good. You know the stakes are high. Get into Onslaught. Pick up number 47 of the Essential X-Men.
Check it out. Okay, I got two for you real quick. Because I get two. First one is Acts of Vengeance. This came out in '80s, late '80s, I think. Really, really good. Awesome idea. The idea was you got all these Marvel villains, you got all these Marvel heroes. Let's just play volleyball with the villains. So,
Like literally?
No, but
I was going to say, is it like a beach?
They know that
The beach episode?
Perhaps I should have better explained that. So they rotate villains. So all the villains get together and like, let's just fight each other's bad guys.
That's fun, actually.
It's awesome. It's so fun.
That's
funny.
Yeah.
It's so you get Thor versus the Juggernaut for the first time. You get it's just that. No. You get the Mandarin versus the X-Men. It's really, really fun. So
Yeah, that
I think you
sounds
really
fun.
like it. It may be a little hard to find, and I didn't want to give you a recommendation that you couldn't find, so I'll give you one that you certainly can, and it's called War of Kings. It's really, really good. It's essentially the Shi'ar Empire versus the Kree, but the Inhumans run the Kree, and Cyclops' evil brother Vulcan, who's like ultra powerful, runs the Shi'ar. And it's those two facing off, and it's just a really good cosmic opera. It's really cool. Check it out.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at the Fantom Zone Pod for more podcast updates.